I'm on the stage, I'm all dressed up, I'm in high heels, and I'm saying, there's a business case for change. But part of me wants to say, it's just wrong. It's just wrong to destroy the planet and deny opportunity to billions of people. And so I'd love to find a way to try and integrate those two sides of ourselves.
I'm Katell and this is Mission to Change, the show where I hear from people who turn business into a force for good and learn about their journey to make it happen. On September 18th, 2019, the Financial Times stated in big, bold letters that capitalism needed a reset. This captured a growing sentiment in the business community that the moral duty of the firm could no longer be limited to maximizing profit in light of the global environmental and inequality crisis. In this episode, I speak with Rebecca Henderson, economics professor at the Harvard Business School. Rebecca teaches future business leaders how to use businesses to address this environmental and inequality crisis. She's on a mission to reimagine capitalism.
My name is Rebecca Henderson. I'm a professor at the Harvard Business School, where I developed a course called Reimagining Capitalism, Business and the Big Problems. It grew from 28 people to nearly 400, and the dean told me I had to take the ideas into the required course, and I wrote a book that tried to capture what I taught.
Rebecca has an impressive academic career. She is one of the top business school professors in the world. Last year, she published a book titled Reimagining Capitalism in a World on Fire. The book highlights lessons from individuals and companies around the world who are making a positive difference by making business a force for good. Rebecca did not start her career working on sustainability. Her initial area of expertise was technology and innovation, studying how companies adjusted to a changing world. And it was a family conversation that led to her sustainability awakening.
It was really my brother who got me interested in sustainability in the first place. He was working as an environmental journalist, this is about 15 years ago, and he just started sending me the scientific papers. Just a steady stream of papers detailing the science and what was going to happen. And even 15 years ago, the science was very clear and very dire. And he sort of gradually wore me down. After a while, I thought, okay, this is really terrible. I need to do something. And then I spent, I think, as much as a couple of years trying to work out how to respond. My first thought was that I should just quit, that I was oiling the wheels of corporate capitalism, and teaching MBAs was all very well, but we had a planetary emergency, and what was I going to do about it? And I thought I should become an activist. But actually, it was my friends who were activists who persuaded me to stay at the business school. I was at MIT at the time, and they said, no, business has a huge role to play in responding to this. And hey, don't you study change or something? And it's kind of about change. So why don't you start working on this? And so I did.
Do you feel now, through what you are working on, your research, your class, the book, that it's some form of activism?
It's definitely activism. No, my book was written to try and change minds, to try and drive action. It's not a scholarly book. It rests on research. It draws on 15 years of research and teaching that I've been doing in this area, but it really tries to say, we can do this. There is a pathway forward. I meet so many people who are in despair. And I think all of us individually are aware of quite how small we are and just, we can't change the whole world. But I came to believe that business could play a central role in responding to these kinds of problems. Climate change is the most obvious, but of course biodiversity and inequality and structural racism. There's enough problems to go around. And so, yes, I think of my life as trying to drive change. That's what I do now. I'm at the stage where I can't really understand why anyone does anything else. which I think is a sign of being an activist. I was like, what are you doing? This is the moment to act.
One of the important premises, and that's also where the title is coming from, it's not about killing capitalism. There is a whole movement now, in particular, some branches of activism that are about to make progress for the planet and for people. We need something else than capitalism. So can you explain to me why you think that's not the right path?
I've been talking to groups of younger people, and they say to me often, why reimagine capitalism? Why not just get rid of it? And I think many young people see capitalism as identified with slavery and exploitation and destruction, and they're like, we just got to start over. I think that's really mistaken. And I think it's mistaken because, we just haven't found another way. Capitalism is a tiger. It's incredibly powerful. It's very efficient. It calls on local energy and people doing the things that they want. And it's an engine of innovation and productivity and change. And so incredibly powerful, right? GDP has more than quintupled. We lead lives that our grandparents could never really have imagined. But like all tigers, you don't want one running wild in your living room. It has to be balanced. It has to be controlled. And what I believe is we have a need to reform and reimagine capitalism. It makes no sense at all that it's legal to burn fossil fuels and throw the greenhouse gases out the window. It makes no sense at all that it's legal in many countries to lobby against good education and good healthcare. We have to rebalance our society so that capitalism does what it does best, but then it's controlled by democracy and civil society so that it works for us, not at our expense. I do not mean to minimize the fury and the rage of so many young people who see that capitalism has been run for the benefit of the very few and has created enormous damage. So I don't mean to walk past that. Clearly we need radical change, but I think we have to build on what we have to do that.
Displayed within the book is a new and fresh approach to capitalism that incorporates free and fair markets, rebalances wealth distribution, and protects the environment while creating purpose-driven jobs. That looks indeed like radical change.
Change is difficult and complicated, and it's always easier not to do it. It's always easier not to take the risks and not to suggest that we do something different. And, nothing will happen if we do nothing. I tried to write a book that people would find helpful, that it would do two things. Firstly, that it would give a sense for what you can do right now, depending on where you are. And secondly, how these actions might add up. Because I think sometimes you think, well, here I am and I'm trying to, reduce the waste stream at a major corporation, or I'm starting a little company to do plant-based foods. And you think, well, this is just a little thing. But we must do these small actions. And the book's really about how to act so that we change the whole system.
So what I really liked in this, radical change that you need, again, is the fact that you break it down, right? So at the level of the firm, you put a lot of emphasis on innovation. The innovation you're talking about is not the next sexy app. It's really about what you call architectural innovation. So that's a new concept. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. Architectural innovation is when you change everything at once. You change the relationship between the pieces of the problem, not just the piece of the problem. Let me give you a concrete example. In the textile industry, when the big textile manufacturers first started thinking about sustainability, they thought, let's do less harm. So let's reduce our waste. Let's make sure we're not abusing the people in the supply chain. Let's try and use organically grown cotton. Let's sort of clean up what we have. But the underlying problem in the textile industry is we have the wrong thing. We have a fast fashion model where everybody, on average, most people wear their new T-shirt like only 3 or 4 times. The fashion industry generates more waste and more emissions than almost any other industry on the planet. I mean, it's a disaster. So it's not just about taking a piece of the problem and making it cleaner. We've got to take the whole problem and rethink the pieces.
So who's in charge of leading that change, right? If it's about having, so is that, do you need to be at the level of the CEO, the exco, the board, at that level to have a full view of what the company is, or?
Well, you went straight for the hardest kind of innovation. And I never recommend to an individual or a firm that they start with architectural innovation for exactly the reason behind your question, which is like, whoa, that sounds hard. Yeah, it is hard. So typically, I recommend, and most companies, most people start with exactly fixing the pieces they can see right here.
Yeah,
You have to start there. And you have to start at the firm level, because otherwise it's just grandiose talk and endless meetings. And I know you've been to many of those meetings, right? So it has to start with concrete change on the ground. Let's go back to textiles. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, no one was talking about architectural innovation in fashion. They were talking about how do we make sure that we don't have epidemic levels of child labor in our supply chain or sexual abuse in our supply chain. How do we cut back on the enormous amounts of waste we generate? And that's really important work. And it lays the foundations for the next step in many ways. It lays the foundation because it focuses the attention of the entire organization. So you get everybody starting to think like, oh, this is a really important part of what we're doing here. And it lays the foundation because many, many companies start to build their business models around behaving more responsibly. So they tell their customers and their employees they're going to do better. And employees and customers look at them and go, okay, so you cleaned it up a bit, but there's still a major problem. So it creates the business case for collaborating to address architectural innovation. Because in the end, with a very few exceptions, it's got to be collaborative. And that requires building trust, that requires building a business case, and you can't get there all at once. You have to walk there. But I think one of the most exciting things about today's moment is that we're seeing more and more industries becoming aware that, whoa, I can't fix deforestation on my own, for example. This is an architectural problem. We have to really create livelihoods on the ground. We have to make it worthwhile not to cut down the trees. And I need all my competitors and most of my supply chain on board if we're going to do this. 5, 10, 20 years ago, I think that would have been really hard. It's still hard, but it's on the table and you can see the momentum towards it.
Clearly, companies will not change the system by themselves. Self-regulation and coalitions have the limits.
I mean, let's talk about the deforestation example for a moment. So Unilever was among the first firms to commit to buying deforestation-free palm oil, which was a major step. Huge, we got to protect the brand. Here's the business model. We must do this. Well, then they discovered that deforestation-free palm oil costs like 18, 20% more than the ordinary stuff. And this is a commodity product and no one will pay more for it. And oh my God. So Unilever said, okay, we can only do this if all our competitors do the same thing. So they pull the competitors together. They commit to buying deforestation-free palm oil. Fantastic success. I mean, 5 years ago, I thought that was going to, clean up deforestation across the world because it wasn't just palm oil. It was beef and soy and timber. It was all the big products. And they made enormous progress. They put together metrics. They put together a way to measure what firms were doing. They put together targets. They had change plans. Fabulous. Didn't work. Just didn't work. Didn't work. Why not? For 2 reasons. One, because when an individual firm does it alone, it's too hard, right? You're trying to stop deforestation in Indonesia. You need everyone, certainly everyone within a region, because how do you go back down to the local farm and say, well, no, this side of the farm, that was deforestation free, but this side, oh, you're still deforesting. You need to have the whole region deforestation free. Which now seems obvious, but in the beginning was not. So you need to work at the regional level and then wait. It has to be worthwhile for the whole region. And they have to know how to do it, and they have to have the support. And so the firms alone couldn't do it because In Indonesia, if I cut down the virgin forest and grow palm, I can send my children to university. And how can you tell me not to do that? You have to give me another way. And to do that, I need the whole community working together to do that. And the firms can be incredibly important in building that coalition, pulling it together, providing the business case, but they can't do it on their own.
Ultimately, to reimagine capitalism, both businesses and governments must be involved. Reducing carbon emissions provides a great illustration of why this is so.
Individual firms can, on average, probably cut their carbon emissions by as much as 40-50% on an economically viable basis. I think we have a lot of evidence to suggest that. So you can be as efficient as the Japanese, the most energy efficient economy in the world. Make a huge difference. Cut emissions by half. That's really worth having. But then it gets really hard. Because now we have to completely restructure construction, agriculture, transportation, how we build our cities, how we think about our infrastructure. And it's a collective problem, right? Everybody has to move. If we're really going to decarbonize, we need to change the grid. We need to change the regulations about how we build cars. Now, no single firm can do it. Even groups of firms can't do it. You have to involve the state. And the single biggest thing that would drive us, I believe, in really addressing climate change is charging people a price for carbon. I mean, at the moment, you can you can burn coal for free. You can cause the deaths of millions of people and enduring climate damage for thousands of years and not pay for it. That doesn't make any sense. And why should you stop doing it, right? Coal is cheap. I'm going to burn it. We need a regulatory framework that will allow us to address these issues. So it has to be business and the state.
Is this because of this necessity for collective action that there is just little firms doing it, just because it's just too much? Is it what stands in the way of more progress more rapidly by firms?
So I think there are several barriers to change.
Right.
One is collective action. That, if all business were owned by one person, we would fix this problem tomorrow. And, climate change is not good for business, it's not good for anyone, but why should I pay to fix it when you will benefit from my paying? So sure, there's a collective action problem. That's why the action by states is so important. But I think a lot of it's just inertia. We've persuaded ourselves that you can't make money and address these big problems. And I think that's as much ideological or laziness. We have so much evidence now that not that you can fix all the problems, but you can cut your waste stream in half and make money. You can certainly reduce your climate emissions. Certainly, I'm a strong believer in this, in nearly every business, in nearly every industry. You can pay your people more, treat them with dignity and respect, decentralize power, and really unleash a great deal of productivity and innovation. And I think the research on this is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. We have this puzzling economic result that in the average industry, the 10% most productive firms produce twice as much output with exactly the same measured inputs as the 10% least productive firms. I mean, economists hated this result. I spent 20 years in windowless rooms trying to make it go away. Well, we must be mismeasuring it. If you measure capital better, if you measure labor better. No, it's really true. If you treat people well, they will do things that you cannot imagine. And, I would be the last person to say, well, embrace sustainability or purpose and it's the royal road to immense competitive advantage. Of course not. Of course you have to have a good strategy and implement it well. But can you compete? Can you survive? Yes. But that takes work. It takes really being willing to do things in a different way and take the time to change. I mean, so often people say, oh, well, I'm going to have a purpose. We hire a purpose consultant, we adopt a purpose, we put it on the wall. I'm like, no. Really embedding purpose in an organization is a change project. It takes years, and you have to really mean it. And that's a lot of work. So,
another barrier to change is overload. Rebecca has calculated that if a company adds up all its projects at any given time, it typically adds to 300% of available capacity, meaning 3 times more than what the company can do.
everyone is overloaded. Everyone is so busy. I studied innovation in organizations for 20 years. And to me, the major barrier, thank you for raising it, is we just keep adding one more project. And when you're overloaded, things go wrong and you spend your time running from project to project, putting out fires. I mean, it sometimes seems to me as if our entire society has sped up. And as human beings, we're just trying to accomplish far too much, far too many different things. It's a deep, deep issue why we're afraid to stop and take time and focus on what's really important. But that's what is necessary if we're really going to change. Because if the organization is overloaded, no one has time to do the work.
Let's say for students who wants to join a good company, right? Or for an investor who wants to invest in a good company, how do they see and they know that this is one that is engaged on that pathway of architectural innovation?
So you like asking really small questions, yeah. I can tell. I think there's a place in the book where I say, I used to think accountants were boring, but now I understand they're the foundations of civilization. Because if you can't measure what's happening, you don't know, right? A nice speech is a nice speech. But you must be able to measure progress. And I think we're in the middle of a deep revolution in thinking about what we measure. So we're moving from just measuring financial quantities to thinking about measuring environmental and social quantities as well. Mm-hmm. And it's a deep revolution because that's really hard. It turns out that even measuring your carbon emissions is super tough. Like, is it just the energy that you're burning right now to heat the building? Or is it the gasoline you use to drive to the campus? Is it the energy that was used to make the cement that's in the bricks? That turns out to be, for universities, a huge chunk of the emissions. Or is it like the emissions in everything you buy every day in your food? I mean, so it's super hard. So if I'm a student or an investor, I recommend getting smart about the measurements. Right. What can we measure right now consistently? Look at that. But also touch and feel. You know, do people really understand what the company is trying to do? Ask the receptionist, what's it like to work here? Does this company feel like it has a greater meaning to you? Don't trust the speeches by the CEOs. I mean, no disrespect to many CEOs, but is it really right through the culture? Because this, I think, is our challenge right now. Yeah. We have to move simultaneously hard and soft. Right. Because if I'm a student and I'm looking for where to work, I'd say also check the financials and the business model. Do they have a strategy? Is the purpose integrated into the strategy? Are they making money? We have to be... There's a wonderful phrase, you have to be as innocent as doves and as wise as serpents, right? Mm-hmm. So you need both, or I was at MIT for many years, both heart and head, right? And so trust your heart. Trust what you hear. If it feels as if it's just talk, it's probably just talk. Right. But you need to check the numbers as well.
What's next in terms of the change you personally want to see happen, if I may ask?
In my dreams, every business school is teaching the idea that business has a responsibility for the broader society, that unless we find a way to change, our society is at risk, and that there is a strong business case for responding. So it's not just, you have a responsibility. It's, this is the change our employees and our customers and our regulators are going to be moving. This is massive opportunity because then, we're going to have to innovate our way out of this problem. It's the only way out. We're going to spend hundreds of trillions of dollars over the next 20 years to fix these issues. So this is not just like an off at the side. This is absolutely central. Not even more important than AI, but about as important, you know?
Yeah.
So we've got this massive digital revolution, which, by the way, if we don't manage well, will cause enormous harm.
He's already doing so, if I may.
So these issues are not peripheral. It's not enough just to put your head down, manage for the short term and for profit maximization. You have to put your head up. And even if you disagree with my politics, you need to have an answer when your employees come talking or your customers want to know what you're doing in this area. So for me, a huge part of where we need to go, and something I hope I'm trying to make a little bit of a difference on, is every business school should be teaching this.
But for Rebecca, the ultimate way to make everybody a change maker is to appeal to our common humanity.
I'm coming to believe that yes, there is a business case for change. We must do it. We must solve the collective action. But I think we also need to find a way to have a conversation about what we most value. You know, pretty much everyone I've met who's really engaged with these issues, you know, is a fantastic business person, but there's also a part of them that is just very human, that is a kind of wider vision of the human than we think of as a business person. Yes, a business person has to be about the numbers and delivering and the bottom line, but I think we also have to be thinking about what are we really doing here? Where are we really going? And I'd love to spend some time thinking about that and to find a way to talk about it that doesn't sound like blah, blah, blah. You know?
Mission to Change is a podcast by the INSEAD Hoffman Global Institute for Business and Society, in collaboration with INTEND. Created and produced by Human Humans, original music, sound design, and mixing by Palomino. Special thanks to Isabelle Stark and Maria Latorre.